Today, our guest is Nuno Prego, and we'll be talking about biotech, investments, and a lot of more interesting things. So stay tuned. Welcome to this episode of Cruzamento Podcast. Before we start the show, if you have enjoyed our content so far, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on our podcast app to support our mission and spread the knowledge. Let's dive in. So today, we are exploring the intersection of technology and healthcare. I'm André Correia, and I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel Guedelha.
Hello, and welcome to another show of Cruzamento Podcast. Today, we have with us Nuno. Hello, Nuno. Very welcome to this show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Brilliant. Very first question. So, in 30 seconds, who is Nuno?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur in life sciences. I've been working in life sciences for more than 20 years. Initially in big pharma, then transitioned to biotech. And I'm very interested in oncology and longevity supported by AI. So it's great to be here with you, and more than happy to go deep dive on several of these different topics.
And recently, it was announced that CellMabs reached a deal with Biotech, and this can potentially, reach $1 billion. So it's quite huge. If this comes true, it would be the biggest biotech transaction ever in Portugal. Can you please tell us a little bit, to our audience, a little bit about what is CellMabs and what is the technology that you've been using?
So CellMabs is a biotech company that was incorporated in 2019. I worked initially in the technology with Professor Paulo Videira, who is now my partner and co-founder in the company. It used technology that was initially developed at Nova University, so it's a spin-off of Nova University. And basically, we were looking at all of these different aberrant signaling and aberrant glycans, sugars that exist only in cancer cells. So we were actually after cancer-specific antigens, these different glycans that we actually wanted to target. We developed antibodies, highly specific antibodies to target these cancer cells. As I mentioned, we incorporated the company in 2019 with venture capital firms, 2 venture capital firms in Portugal Ventures and Ovion. And we were able to generate several modalities to treat different types of solid tumors very successfully. We were actually looking for fundraising, trying to get a Series A. And this opportunity came along, and of course we had to let go of the technology so that this could reach patients sooner. But yes, I mean, this, because the technology was very interesting and because the technology was actually very innovative. Biotech made a very interesting offer, and they're going to be taking it to the clinic soon, and hopefully we'll be treating patients with solid tumors very, very soon.
It's a very impactful space, so oncology. Excellent. No, but there is one thing, and it's who you are. You cannot stop creating impact. So you recently announced another company, the creation of Valvian. Can you please tell us about what this new venture is about? Tell us, please.
Sure. I mean, well, Valvian is also a very ambitious venture. It's focused on age-related diseases, but also in oncology, some hard to treat, non-responsive tumors. We're going to be addressing those also. Of course, it's the field that we know very well. And so we're still going to be working on some of these specific areas. But in the process of working on oncology, because we were looking at the different signaling that tumor cells have. So if you look at on the surface of cancer cells, they have all of these different types of well, we consider them to be biomarkers, right? But they play a role. They're there doing something, right? And we actually look at those different structures that exist on the surface of cancer cells. And we developed not only antibodies, but we also developed immunotherapies, other types of immunotherapies. And we bumped into age-related diseases from the perspective of an immunotherapy. We were looking at these different cancer cells and this immunotherapy. It was actually binding to cancer cells, but also to normal cells. We found that odd. So we decided to just put it on hold because, what we were doing is developing highly specific targeted therapies, right? If that was binding to normal cells, we didn't want to have anything to do with that. So we decided to put it on hold. But then I decided to, a few months ago, I decided to go back and to look at it. For some reason, if it might be sharing some sort of signature with cancer cells, right? So eventually, Andre, Danielle, we could just be in the presence of cells that could eventually be pre-malignant or, some sort of twisted way. So we realized that those cells that we were binding to, the normal cells, weren't actually normal cells. They actually share the same signature with cancer cells because they're trying to evade the immune system. And those are actually cells involved in aging. So those are considered to be the senescent cells. And of course, that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. And we are really excited with it because now we have the possibility of providing the body with a way with its own immune system to actually react to each person's senescent cells. And so we can put our immune system to fight the senescent cells. So it's actually very, very cool. And of course, we're using AI to do that. But we have our own AI. I like to stress that out because people always ask us if what we have is an API to OpenAI, to Gemini. We also have our language models, which is critical for dealing with these kinds of not only data, but with the outcome that we want, and especially considering the regulatory agencies.
So Nuno, we cannot let that one go away, right? You have your own AI, and from what you said, you are working with data. That AI is to analyze that data as well. So let's focus a little bit on your AI. And what I would like to ask you is, can you elaborate a little bit about the difference between these large language models and the small language models that you are probably using in your specific context? And also, what are the challenges that you are facing, and how are you resolving those challenges by creating these language models of your own?
Well, starting with the difference, I would say that for us, it's very important that we need to be prepared with what we're going to be dealing with in terms of regulatory, questions, regulatory constraints. The work coming out of the output of the language model needs to be very transparent. So we need to understand it cannot be a black box, and large language models can sometimes be a black box. So we need to understand why the output is that one, and why is it not different. So we need to of course, work with data that is not biased. And when we are working with large language models, sometimes the information that is there can eventually take the output to a different direction. It can eventually bias the data, and that for healthcare is not healthy, right? So it's that old saying, right, in AI, which is garbage in, garbage out. We need to make sure that not only we work on a very good set of data, and for us, that is also what we're going to be doing, is working on new data, collecting samples from patients, analyzing it using the same approach, because as you know, I mean, the information that you have across all repositories, it's not organized. It's not it is not done in a way that AI can read it with the same level of efficiency as we're doing it. So it's very important to have this organized, let's say, in structured data that we can correlate. That is one thing. So we are controlling the data that we're providing to the machine. At the same time, we're working with a blank canvas, let's say, in terms of data. So the only thing that the small language model is able to do is to process the language and of course, natural data, let's say, so that it can then later on process the data that we're going to be generating. So the only thing that we need is a small language model that has not yet been biased by any sort of information that is not correct. That's one thing. And then in the end, of course, thinking about the challenges, the challenge is the training of the machine and the way you fine tune it. That's always the problem, because when you're training it, you're telling the machine what you actually want to achieve. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's kind of correcting the way it's operating. And so you need a lot of data to make that happen. You need a lot of training to make that happen. Of course, we are lucky to have cases that we can train it with and benchmarks that we can use. But of course, it's still a process. And I mean, large language models are are highly trained on large data sets, and that helps a lot. But for us, it's critical that in the end of the day, if we move to the next steps in terms of product development, that if FDA, EMA asks us why we decided to move to the left or to the right, we know exactly why, and we have full clarity on the assumptions that were given and the process behind the machine learning and the output. So that is for us very, very, very important.
And so, for example, would that be right to say if you ask a specific healthcare-related question to ChatGPT, the answer will be, this is the kind of example, whilst the data you will be providing to your small language model, it's more restricted, it's more curated in a way. Is this the right for our audience to understand, kind of comparison?
Yeah, so this is a closed model, so it only has access to the information that we're feeding it. So if you ask any other question, it only is going to be answering. I mean, it only has the knowledge that we have provided, so it does not have, let's say, internet access for the reasons that I mentioned. But I mean, if I understood your question correctly, I mean, if you ask ChatGPT a question about life sciences, let's say, it's going to be going through all of the internet. It's going to be including all of the conspiracy theories, all of the wrong information that it's also picking up on TikTok that some people are using to sell products. Think about nutrition, longevity or age-related diseases. It's picking up on all of that. Even, for example, if it is also having access to the papers, the actual papers that you have on these different academic repositories,
like Nature and stuff,
like Nature, right? Okay, so let's use Nature for that matter. So let's assume that let's remove out of the equation all of the conspiracy theories and wrong information. Let's assume that the information is not curated enough. And when I say curated enough, means that it has not been stripped from information that can eventually provide wrong outputs. And it has full access to Nature. The fact that it has access also to the discussion part of the paper, it generates a huge bias in the output. Because as you know, when you're doing a paper and you go to the discussion part, you're kind of playing the devil's advocate, right? And you're generating different hypotheses. So it creates a bias that is misleading for the final output. And so just the fact that it's, having access to non-curated data, it's a problem. Then the final part it has to do, and I just recently posted something about this. I mean, more than 10,000 papers were retracted last year just because of, actually Nature published this, saying that more than 10,000 papers were retracted last year because there were false, misleading, or based on fraudulent premises, let's say. So this is what the AI is picking up. So we need to be, in AI, we need to be very, very cautious with how we not only manage information, but how we provide that information to the AI in a structured way that it can, it can still, it's still very susceptible to all these different nuances, right? So, and that's something that we need to first train.
Interesting. You talk about being conscious and being very careful with, and obviously our minds come to data privacy as well. And so this topic, tell us, how do you approach this critical topic of data privacy at Valvin?
So, I mean, we're going to be working with data sets from patients, from healthy people, healthy individuals, and it's a concern, right? I mean, if you think about everything that everybody's doing, especially in the US, I mean, it's usually a playground. It's a fun place for AI, and then data safety comes next. That's why usually when they come to Europe, then they kind of face this bottleneck. Of course, not only for those reasons, also for corporative and political reasons. Of course, the Europeans like to restrict the market to provide room for European companies to grow. So they kind of generate barriers to the entrance of these US companies. But the matter of fact is that these companies, when they come to Europe, they usually face this bottleneck that usually, it's not something that they take into consideration when they're working with these big data sets. In our case, it's critical that we have this in consideration. It's very important that we find a way, and we did that, to have access to all of the data in a very dynamic way, so that for different requests we can get access to all of the data of a specific patient, but in a way that is not providing any sort of still keeping the anonymity, right? So instead of first selecting one, the data that will eventually keep the data anonymous, and that's kind of a frozen data, what we were able to do is have this dynamic approach to the data, and then we have the AI working on all of the data and pulling it up in a way that it is useful. So you can just ask different questions about the same situation, getting access to different types of data for the same patients without compromising the safety of the data. For us, it was critical because we needed to have access to all of the data. Because, I mean, if you think about it, just giving you an example, I mean, if for example, a woman, a man, the gender, or whatever other genders, but I mean, biologically, what's relevant for the therapeutical approach, the age, where the person lives, it's important because of context, because of heterogeneity and to be able to include large, genetic people. So this for us is important. And I'm just thinking about this. If you also include the blood type, genome, all of the profiling of the patient, sometimes it's important for us to correlate specific sets of data. And sometimes we need to correlate other types of data, but we need to have access to all of that data from each one of the patients. So that's kind of basically how we approach this and how we were able to tackle it. But of course, several challenges imposed, right? And even the regulatory agencies are changing about this. So it's very dynamic.
And I think every player in the ecosystem is actually learning how to deal with this new reality, right, of the AI, data, privacy. So, and it's quite interesting that all these is actually reshaping the healthcare landscape in order to kind of adjust to that or adapt to that. We will need to change the mindset. There is a lot of change management involved, vision from the leadership teams as well into bringing and accommodating the digital transformation. So looking at Valvian in this specific case, Nuno, how are you planning to leverage the digital transformation to actually improve the patient outcomes and to streamline the operations? Do you have any examples that you can share already?
Well, I think it's one of the things is to incorporate the all of these processes and highly efficient process within our own product development chain, let's say. So the way, for example, we were approaching the product development at CellMaps, it was based on a strategy that we had of let's say engineering. So we were developing products attempting to not reach this wall. So our idea was every time we were to generate this sort of experiment, we needed to, in the end, to have two objectives reached. One, eventually, at least one of them should be achieved. So the first one was the main goal. So if we wanted to look at efficacy, were all of the assumptions there? Were we able to achieve what we wanted in terms of efficacy, of safety? The controls were there. But at the same time, we also needed to aim for failure, right? So we needed to understand that, well, if that first objective is not met, then are we able to also design this in a way that can generate a derivative that will, stop us from hitting a wall? So we could not make experiments that would just, fall by themselves if they were not achieving their main goal. Their main meaning the principal goal. So each one of the experiments needed to generate information to feed other streams of development, other streamlines. So initially we were doing that in a very, I would say, in a very basic way. Then we kind of turned that into a process, very elaborate. Then we put that into an algorithm, and now we're going to be doing that at a higher scale for everything that is coming out of these new AI generated candidates that were, that is coming out of this process that I just mentioned earlier. So this is just an example of the ways we have been incorporating and trying to make our process even more effective. So I think it's with that. I'm not saying that it's not interesting to work with apps or with AI that can eventually increase our own productivity. There are several general or business related apps, but I think that AI can be very useful to help us leverage the know-how that each one of the companies have. I think that's very important, and also because every company has its own MOA. I think it's very important to have, for example, and Danielle, without getting into any sort of in confidence here, we've both worked at a company which is very much compliant. Looking back, and without trying to put you in a hard stop or in a hard spot there, I can now look back and think about different ways to optimize the SOPs that we had, and those could be ways that we could use to fine tune the way that we were operating. So when companies, for example, have so many SOPs and so many best practices that they need to meet, I mean, just these different tools can be highly effective.
No, definitely. That's the standard operating procedures, SOPs, and all the pharma industry, all the big companies. I think they have that challenge, and that very much hinders them to innovate. And we have a challenge here. That's why I believe CellMaps, you guys were so successful, your agility, and of course your DNA. And this is linked, Nuno, just going back to the next thing that pops up in our mind, to ecosystem. Whenever we develop a company, and it's a successful company like CellMaps and Valvian, hopefully, it depends on an ecosystem. And you are Portuguese. I mean, might not be the first country in the world one thinks about for biotechs, but you did it, you made it. Can you share with our audience what steps Portugal could take to strengthen this healthcare ecosystem? Because we know you are a big advocate.
And you are too, and thank you for that. So, because we cannot do this alone. But again, I think we needed to have people like you, both of you, an amazing Portuguese talent that is willing also to help Portugal grow. People that have this latitude of thinking, that has been able to work in top companies, understand what the best practices are, understand what can eventually be brought back to Portugal to leverage the resources that we have here internally. So I think that one of the things that make Portugal very interesting in terms of the biotech, I mean, and I say this all the time, I think the location is critical. We're in the same time zone as the UK. We have access to continental talent, European continental talent. So for example, for US companies that want to come to Europe, I mean, in the past, they were going to the UK. Now, as you know, after Brexit, UK doesn't have the same access to European talent. Of course, there's always the option of going to Denmark or France, Belgium, etc., Germany. But of course, if you think about the advantages of being in Portugal, we're talking about a country that is one of the safest countries in the world. You have all of this huge talent at a much more, cost effective, which is, I mean, we are much more cost effective. At the same time, we have these, we have the weather, we have the food,
the people. Please no people
and right. So I was already including that in the talent, but you're right. Even the people around, I mean, the people are amazing, and so the fact that we have the amount of PhDs that we have in Portugal, the way we have the educational system, and we all are very critical about, education and healthcare in Portugal. But I mean, in the end of the day, we have so many good things that we should leverage. I mean, we're never happy, right? But I think that we should, as private entities, be the ones driving economy, and then the state and the government should eventually follow. And I think what we actually needed was a success story. I think we have that in IT. We already have that in medtech. I mean, if you think about Sword Health, it's one of the unicorns, and is doing an amazing work there. Virgílio, the CEO, is also a very talented Portuguese guy doing amazing things here for that specific area. And I think that the strategy is making sure that this success story can attract new investors, so that they can understand that it is Portugal is investable. There is a good return on investment here. We are able to generate science and products at the same level as the US or Northern Europe. And we're going to be working on that. So I think that one of the things that we actually want to do with not only with Valvian, but a vertically integrated structure that we're going to be setting up is I think that is going to be providing the possibility for other companies and third parties to come to Portugal and eventually grow the ecosystem. And there's no way that even Valvian can grow by itself here. I was just there, and I'll wrap this up just by just saying this. I was on the 2nd of May in New York presenting CellMabs in an event organized by Johnson & Johnson. And one of the things, and I was there with 50 investors, US investors, and I mean, I don't know how many, almost all of them were asking me what was going on here in Portugal. I mean, how many companies that we have here? They were asking me, wasn't it preferable to go to the US, to Boston, or to New York, and be eventually growing at a higher rate, because we were being boosted by that ecosystem, because you have access to other entrepreneurs, investors that can help you. I mean, you can go for a coffee with a venture capital firm. You can go, you have access to all of that amazing talent. And I think that we're here in these different silos, and we should change that. So I think we needed a success story, and if these investors come along, I think it's something that we're going to make happen really soon.
And we were talking about people and talent. No, you also mentioned about the number of excellent PhDs that we have in the country. So let's talk about talent for a little bit. We need to cultivate and retain more talent in Portugal. I think this is a topic that in every industry at the moment is being discussed in our country. In the biotech, that's definitely an issue to keep the people in the country. So what are your thoughts on how can we achieve this? How can we retain this talent? And does Portugal have, at this point in time, any biotech hub already formed or a place where it should kind of invest to get the talent from?
I think that we should always talk about the tremendous effort that's being done by Biotech and Joana Branco and Cantanhede. I think it's doing an amazing effort in trying to create some dynamic in Portugal around the biotech sector. I think it's also public that we're trying to organize something. I mean, they're trying to organize, and I'm also making myself available to help them, bringing major biotech events to Portugal. But if you ask specifically about a biotech hub, I think that they are in the making. I think that we're also in the presence of people that are looking to do something very interesting in biotech hubs in Portugal. Correct, Daniela? So
yes,
I think
correct.
and I think that eventually, and going back to the question of the location, I think it's if we were going to retain talent, that's one side of the problem. Then to attract talent, especially the talent that we need to help that we need to help us also educate and train the new talent that is here in Portugal. It needs to be in locations that can attract international talent. So I think that initially we will need to work very close to the centers that are able to attract talent. And of course, that means Lisbon, Porto, Coimbra, Braga, and I think that these are the major centers. They eventually who knows Algarve, for example. Who knows? I think that could also be an option. But I mean, if you think about the infrastructure that needs to be set up, the proximity to clinical institutions and to universities, I think that the logic step would be Lisbon and Porto. But I mean, I think we're getting there. But we're not there yet at a hub. A hub needs investors. We have that. Good technology. We have that in academia. We need teams that are investable, and that is something still in the making. And then to have a hub, we need different teams that are making things at different stages so that they can be mutually supportive. So it needs time to grow.
Nuno, thank you so much for your time and availability. It was really, really a very interesting journey. We really like that we need teams, and this has an impact and it's something very profound. In today's show, we talk about CELMABs, Valvian, talent, biotech centers, international talent, a lot about ecosystems. So Nuno, really appreciate it. Maybe the very last question, in case our audience wants to know more about you, where can they find you online?
Well, I have a LinkedIn, which is basically the social network that I use the most. I should start working more on Instagram, but I need to get out of the bunker so that I can do that, right? Because it's pretty much image driven, and so I think we're going to be working on that soon also. But I mean, we will also be reachable via the sites, the Valvian site. So more than happy, and I welcome researchers willing to also work with us. And thank you so much for the invite. It was great talking to you.
No, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you, and thank you a lot for sharing all your experiences and learnings as well. As for us, thank you very much for everyone that has been listening and watching us. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our podcast for the latest episodes. Also, connect us on LinkedIn, Instagram, not so much on bunker images on there, but in any of your favorite podcast apps. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon on another Cruzamento podcast. Thank you, Nuno. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nuno.
Thank you. Bye-bye.